Call us to order, please, Ms. Douglas.
Reagan Molitor.
Present.
Betty Reynolds.
Here.
Ginger Fitch.
Here.
Chelsea Martin.
Present.
Dylan Hides.
Here.
Do we have, I don't believe we have any audience communication today, so we'll move right into new business. I thought we had a number. Do you have those resolutions?
Chair Fitch, may I, before we get into the discussion of this?
Oh, yes, and I too. Let me go and then you go. I'm a local attorney. I represent students and parents in the district. A matter may come before the board that materially benefits one of my clients. If it does, I will abstain from any discussion or decisions on the matter without identifying my client. And Ms. Molitor?
Okay, oh, I almost knocked it over. Get a second time. Okay. On the agenda tonight has to do with some real estate purchase and sales agreements proposals for the Frog Pond area. And as I've disclosed with my board, and now I'm disclosing publicly, that an actual conflict for me has arisen with regards to that. I am a landowner in that area, or I own part of a piece of property in that area. And as a result, I am not participating in the discussions and would abstain from any decision-making that may occur this evening on this matter.
Thank you. So the board has before it the sale of real property proposals, resolution number 2017-13 and resolution number 2017-14. Is there any objection to proceeding to a vote on a motion on these resolutions? Hearing no objection, is there a motion on the floor?
I will move that the board adopt resolutions 2017-13 and 2017-14 as written.
Second.
Discussion?
Dylan Hides.
Aye.
Chelsea Martin.
Yes.
Ginger Fitch.
Yes.
Betty Reynolds.
Yes.
Are we done with that item?
Yeah.
If I may, I would just like to briefly state thank you to your efforts on the careful handling of this property. And really thank you to those who came before us, who invested in this property. The purchase price was considerably less than what we're selling it for, and so it was definitely a very good return on investment. And just been very pleased with the way that the staff has handled all of our questions, and very careful and thoughtful and deliberate throughout this process. And so I just wanted to express my gratitude for how you've handled these resources, and we're in a good position to be to have this property to sell.
So I had a question. Doug's not here, so. Oh, sorry. So the question is, now that it's passed and it appears the transactions will be closing in July, I'm wondering what use will be made of the proceeds as we enter our budget discussions. Will it be part of the anticipated revenue for 2018-19?
Of course, the budget is not completed yet, but it's moving in that direction enough so that we anticipate proceeds from land sales eventually coming in. However, they will not arrive during the 18-19 fiscal year that we're currently budgeting for. But even in spite of that, we've set up a separate fund to receive those amounts. And I can say this: none of those funds are planned for the coming budget, general fund, or other expenditures of any kind, for two reasons. One is that I don't anticipate receiving the funds during the coming fiscal year. Number two, there's been no board discussion or any leading up to it, which is to say, there are no plans at this point as to how that money will be spent from a budgetary standpoint. Does that answer you? Any follow-up question on that?
No, I was just wondering, will they go to the general fund? Will they be used for capital construction? Eventually,
Well, first, the closing date will happen July 1st, 2019. And then it will be up for discussion and decision by the board.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I wanted to echo Director Martin's statement that the staff's done an excellent job here. And what I want to state for the public record is, although we approved it very quickly tonight, I want the public to be aware that this has been a process that we've worked very hard on. A lot of thought has gone into this, balancing the needs of the district in the future, the nature of the property, and getting the absolute highest dollar we could to ensure we get good return on our investment. So a lot of care has gone on this decision. So just want to make sure the public understands that the quickness of our approval is not an indication of what we put in this behind it.
We'll move on to the next item of business, which is the auditor selection. Mr. Middlestetter. Oh, yes. I think you have something you want to share with us, but also there were two board members who participated in the interviews, and I want to give you a chance as well to talk. Yes.
Maybe I could just introduce the subject, because this is a
Perfect.
board decision, and,
Yes.
and so I think that
Yes.
will play in
Thank
nicely.
you.
Just a short review. You'll remember we've had some interest in reevaluating our status with our auditors. We've been with the firm that we're currently with, Polly Rogers, for some time, and so in February, early in February, we published RFP request for submissions from auditing firms, both in and outside of Oregon. Got a pretty good response from people who looked at our paperwork and considered it. In the end, there were only 5, 1 from out of state and 4 from within state, that actually submitted a proposal. On the March 22nd, we had an initial screening, went through those 5 and reduced it down to 3, and determined that those were probably the 3 best submissions from which to bring our auditors in and actually do some interviews, get to know them, and have them talk us through their proposals. And so then on April 20th, 3 firms did come forward and were interviewed, and information is before you and will be discussed by the 2 board members that were part of that process. At this point, I think, unless you see otherwise, I'll go ahead and sit down and let you as a board work through how you want to proceed, and if there are any questions you need to ask, that's fine. But otherwise, the board, the auditors do take care of the board. The board hires the auditors, and so I'd just like to let you proceed with that. Does that seem appropriate?
Doug, could you also introduce your staff who's here tonight? And I know that your senior accountant, Teresa Davis, was part of the process in terms of the screening and interviews, but maybe introduce the rest for the board?
Yes, thank you. And on your right, Teresa Davis, senior accountant, Becky Martzel, payroll specialist, Paula Hodeling, AP specialist, and thank you. I got nervous out front. Hillary does such a good job for us, and I give her a bad time. Now she's going to give me a bad time when I go by her door. Thank you, Hillary Morgan. And she's our benefits specialist, also in the payroll department, but tends to take care more of the health insurance and benefit areas.
We have
And
one other staff member who's not able to be here tonight, but that would have rounded out your team.
yes, and she couldn't be here tonight. That puts it all together for us. We work really hard. This team works really hard. Makes me look good if I don't foul it up in any way, and we have a lot of fun. We do a lot of hard work, and it's all for a good cause.
Yeah, do you want to add anything?
I happily got the opportunity to participate in the interview and get to know you session we had with the three candidates. I agree with all the content that we saw in the document that Dr. Ludwig and Mr. Middlestetter provided us. I mean, when I left that meeting, I was confident that any of these three firms can do a fantastic job for our district. My wonderings around, if I had to pick one, would be what is it that we as a board are looking for? Like, what signals to us the attributes of a group that would give us the highest confidence in their work? I asked Kelly to print out and provide. I put my notes together. There were some questions that were asked during that interview process. These questions are not the verbatim questions, but the question was to that effect. And the answers are, the way in which I heard them. There are, very small nuances. All three of these firms have groups that exclusively do auditing. The Grove Mueller firm does 50% tax work still and about 50% auditing. You have the Wilcox and Ardondo and the Polly Rogers groups are 100% auditing work. Of those, the Wilcox group does 100% of schools. Polly Rogers does schools and other municipalities. I mean, so they all have varying degrees of what they do, but they all do auditing, and they all represent some very large school districts and have for a number of years. As far as the depth of their teams, the sizes of their firms, and the background, like the number of employees they would have working, there are some differences in the pool of people that they have, as well as their ability to switch out personnel if you want new and fresh eyes. Across the board, that is a practice that all three of them participate in, and that they all value and know that there's benefit in having fresh eyes reviewing your financials from every couple of years or so. However, their practices within how many people they switch out and who those fresh eyes are vary just a little. So again, it's kind of a personal preference there as to what may give you greater confidence. And I will just say that, like, question number 2 that I have outlined, it was like, who's your team comprised of, kind of goes hand in hand with the question you find at the bottom of the sheet about from a year-to-year basis, who on your team is performing the audit. You kind of have to read those two together. Of note, and it was something that I also saw at a footnote in kind of the compilation from Dr. Ludwig and Doug, was this note of we are changing CFOs. And kind of the information that came up, I think, organically. I'm not certain to what extent each of these auditors knew that we are in that process. That wasn't a question necessarily. But that Larry Swank of Grove Mueller had actually said that you don't want to change auditors when you have staffing changes. And he actually said, in fact, sometimes they don't need to always add fresh eyes because it's the staff of who they're auditing switches over enough that is the change, or they're kind of the control for their firm. And that then Polly Rogers' firm had just made mention that, which is just good for us as a board to know, and whoever's auditing, that in the first couple years after you do switch auditing firms, fraud is much more difficult to detect. And it's just because they're getting used to us and our controls, and they don't know where to look. Doesn't mean that they won't detect it. It just may take a little while for them to be able to detect it. So I just thought that was interesting. Those are two complexities I hadn't really considered as we were moving through selection of auditors. So and if anybody had any questions as well, I'm more in depth, I can share specifics. I certainly have a leaning in my own personal preference, but again, any three of these firms I think can and will get the job done for us.
I wanted to spend a minute just talking kind of about concepts and process. I wanted to highlight the statutes that govern the auditor selection process. One is ORS 297425 requires annual audits and states that audits and reviews shall be made by accountants pursuant to contracts. And board policy DIE states in part that auditors shall be selected by the board at the organizational meeting, and our board policy DJCA states that all personal services contracts shall be based on demonstrated qualifications, et cetera, and encourage competition, discourage favoritism, and obtain services at a fair and reasonable price. At our July 10th, 2017 organizational meeting and our July 2016 organizational meeting, Doug indicated that the audit work had already started, and his memo to us described the resolution designating officials for 2017-18 as the purpose as letting the public know who our key business partners are as we move into the new year. So Polly Rogers has been our auditor for at least 15 years, which is as far back as the records are available on our website, and possibly much longer. And what it appears, based on a question, is that an original contract or agreement has simply been renewed or rolled forward with adjustments made for compensation. So I think that based on laws and policies, I think we have some work to do on conforming our policies with statutes, with both the statutes and with the audit timeline. So I just wanted to make that comment that it appears it should be the board should be making the selection based on an open competitive process. And I'm not sure that we've followed that, but hopefully we'll spend some time taking a look at our policies. And then a big part of the discussion is auditor rotation. And so I just wanted to talk again real quickly about that concept. Those discussions go back over 40 years at the national level. For example, in 1977, Senator Lee Metcalf suggested auditor rotation when Equity Funding, which was a large insurance and mutual fund, falsified its sales figures. And after that, there were highly publicized frauds at Enron, WorldCom, and Tyco, which resulted in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002. And it included requirements regarding auditor independence, and the Securities and Exchanges Commissions formed a Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, and they came up with proposals for the mandatory rotation of auditors. But there were industry objections based on the limited number of firms available, the Big Four, and that Public Company Auditing Oversight Board withdrew their proposal. But then again in 2008, there were a series of scandals involving Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Citibank, Bank of America, AIG, General Motors, General Electric, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and others. And that prompted more discussion about whether or not their financial statements were fairly represented to clients by auditors. And then coterminously with that, many articles described auditors as asleep at the switch regarding Bernie Madoff. And so it just seems like there was a kind of a cycle of problem and then a proposal to rotate auditors, then problem, and then enter into that cycle again. And I'm bringing that up, the concept of rotation auditors up, because I think it does have origins at the national level, and certainly has a basis in the fact that there are only the big four accounting firms. But again, after the 2008 situation and Bernie Madoff situation, the PCOAB again proposed audit firm rotation. The former Comptroller General of the United States said the most important improvement that would result from the requirement of audit firm rotation would be, one of the most important things happen to clients. So again, articles indicate that the audit lobby cited concerns about the lack of choice because there are really only four to choose from. And then fast forward to today, we have Wells Fargo that was just fined $1 billion by federal regulators. Two of Wells Fargo's major investors called for Wells Fargo to rotate audit firms, not partners. And a study has recently, in February 2018, has been published in Accountancy Review on the negative effect of long auditor tenure, and that partner rotation elements of Sarbanes-Oxley was insufficient. So there are a number of supporters, in addition to that article, there are a number of sources that support audit firm rotation, and I listed those in the back 2 pages. They include the former Comptroller General of the United States, authors on tax law and compliance, again, the chair of the SEC's Public Company Audit Oversight Board, the Journal of Governmental and Nonprofit Accounting, the New York Local Government Toolkit, and others. So I know that Dr. Ludwig's memo mentions the GFOA recommendations as governmental entities shall enter into multi-year agreements of at least 5 years in duration when obtaining the services of independent auditors. And unfortunately, the lack of competition among audit firms fully qualified to perform public sector audits could make the policy of mandatory auditor rotation counterproductive. But those are actually 2 different recommendations, and they've been conflated. So the reason I bring it up is the context of the second provision of GFOA talks about the need to actively seek the participation of all qualified firms at the end of a contract period, and that automatic renewal of contracts is inconsistent with that particular recommendation, and basically that governmental bodies essentially rotate their audit firms at the end of a contract period, and it's only then that they say there may be a lack of competition among audit firms. But I think the context is important. Even GFOA makes a statement about the importance of rotation of auditors. So that brings me to my preference is that I strongly subscribe to the concept of rotation of auditors, and I understand that with Doug's planned retirement, that the timing may be difficult. I also note that the resolution we passed last July was for the 2017-18 school year, and so conceivably we already have a resolution in place, and we could just let Polly Rogers complete the 17-18 audit and revisit it when we have a new business manager on board, so that person is able to participate in the selection.
Do board members have questions of Director Reynolds or Director Molitor regarding their interviews of the firms?
I do. I think it might be helpful to begin with, it sounds like both of you have preferences as to who we go with. Are you comfortable sharing who you think we should hire?
So based on that description of my preference for rotation of auditors, I support Wilcox Arredondo and Company. Significantly, they have a good range of clients from within this region, and that includes Clackamas ESD, which would help in a seamless understanding of the services that are provided by the ESD. They demonstrated a very clear understanding of the scope and the approach to the audit. They have highly qualified staff who are located within this area. Their fees are very competitive, and there are no complaints or any disciplinary actions against the firm.
And for me, honestly, I would give a slight nod to Polly Rogers. My rationale for that is they represent a wider number of school districts. They have more personnel. They have a greater ability to rotate our work amongst their auditors. Then, after that, I liked Wilcox Arredondo. They would be my second choice. And the Grove Mueller, they have, they do Salem, Kaiser, huge school districts. I mean, so they're very capable. Their fees were significantly higher, and I was not certain as to why that was necessarily. They seem to be providing the exact same services. So that would kind of be my caution, as well as they're not as, exclusively auditing, although they do the work, they're familiar with it. But that was based, that's kind of my rationale and how I saw them and my preference.
So I had one more question for each of you. So, we're trying to balance competing interests here. One is there's certainly value in changing auditors. I was just reading the second page of what Betty said, and it says, quote, so according to GFOA, ideally, auditor independence would be enhanced by a policy requiring that the independent auditor be replaced at the end of the audit contract. As Betty mentioned, that's obviously a value. Keeping Polly Rogers wouldn't really align with that value. On the other hand, we are losing our CFO this year, and it seems like there's a strong interest in not changing the CFO and the auditor in the same year. And so I was kind of wondering if Reagan could address her thoughts about not changing the auditor, even though that is a value, and if I could hear Betty address her concern, if any, with changing both in the same year.
I'll just make a comment. It's kind of interesting, and it's one of my wonderings about this process as well, is, there is this kind of academic language out there about, an advice that it'd be great to switch auditors and, do so regularly. It seems what I've learned from this process, from speaking with each one of these firms, is that, the actual switching of the firm tends to be less common, but as long as you are switching auditors, or having fresh eyes within that firm on a routine basis, it tends to have the same effect as switching firms. However, what's also interesting, and I'm very aware of, the language Betty has cited, is that each one of these firms, any of the school districts that they represent, they have very long-term relationships with those districts. And I know Dr. Ludwig wrote it down, and I know it didn't make it into her notes. I'm trying to figure out, but a lot of them were 10 years, 12 years, and possibly even longer. I saw Dr. Ludwig making the notes, so I didn't. But I found that was really interesting, because there is, this language out there that, you should be trading or switching routinely, but these firms aren't doing that with their clients. And in fact, they're like, well, it's actually better to get to, It was a fine line, because it's better to get to know your clients and know their controls, because at the same time you get to know their areas of risk. And so therefore you can examine, you know where to examine and where to look and what to sample more regularly and routinely. Although they all across the board acknowledge that then at the same time there is a danger in getting too close with a client and too familiar. And so they all had various ways of having a control that would address that. And a lot of it involved switching. Sometimes it was switching, your main partner who's overseeing your case, your matter, and sometimes it was switching various people at different levels. And I made notes as to whose practice was what. But that's a good question. And I don't know. Oh yeah. Okay, so like for example, Wilcox Ardondo, in their information that they provided us, they've worked for the Canby School District doing their audits for 22 years, McMinnville School District for 20 years, and Clackamas ESD for 10. And I recall the same thing with Salem Kaiser, with Grove Mueller, and Betty said, we've had Polly Rogers for somewhere around 15 years. So I don't know what the right answer is to that question.
So I think the primary reason that generated the discussion, at least at the national level, and I think it trickles down to GFOA standards and other standards, is lack of competition. But in our case, there is not a lack of competition. We had 15 inquiries. We had 5 responses. So I think that ideally we would engage in competition at the end of every contract period. I think as an alternative, in view of Doug's announced retirement as business manager, perhaps we could either table further discussion, because we have a resolution with Polly Rogers to complete the 17-18 audit. If we postponed it until a new CFO was on board, that way a new CFO, a new business manager could have a hand in selecting the auditor before we get committed to a 3 or a 5-year period, which will be on top of this very long tenure. Or we could simply do it for a time certain less than the 3 to 5 years that's been mentioned. So, if you're not comfortable changing both business manager and switching auditors in the same year, a way around it is to shorten the existing contract with Polly Rogers.
So are you proposing maybe use them, have a resolution tonight that approves Polly Rogers for 1 more year, and then get another business manager in kind of the swing of things, and then revisit who to use for a longer-term contract?
Yes. Let's see. I think that would be that is one option, or we could simply table it, since we already have a resolution adopted in July 2017, that designates Polly Rogers as our auditor for the 2017-18 year, and simply let that audit be complete, wait for the new business manager, and readdress the issue at that time.
For its staff. My recollection is that there was a retirement from the business office staff, but not any change in personnel. Is that correct? In the last couple of years?
There was a retirement last year.
Otherwise, the staff has remained consistent.
And an addition of 1 staff member 2 years ago. Yeah. Oh, and Paula. You want to come to the...
Question kind of what changes have we had in staff recently? Is that
Yeah,
kind
in the
of where
last couple of
where
years.
you're going? Go back, I don't know, maybe 3 years. Our senior accountant retired, and then our payroll lead person retired, and then we've added Hillary Morgan and Caitlin that isn't here this evening. Oh, yeah, Paula was here in the district but moved, is new to our department.
And while you're there, so I'm looking at the resolution. I see that I signed it. It's through the 2018 school year, though. That doesn't cover the audit year, does it? Or can you clarify that?
This has been a point of discussion when, for the last couple of years, when we've got to that July resolution. I'm not going to speak to the legality of it, but my impression as a business manager is that Oregon statute says that when we start each new year, and the board could have changed and maybe did, or maybe doesn't, but at the start of a new year, the governing body must declare legally, announce to the world essentially that we have an agreement and are working with these people. The fact that we did that in July, I don't see that as a regulation that requires, therefore, that they do the next audit.
Because in fact, isn't it true that the request for proposals sought for an audit for this year?
Yes. One could build a case. I'm not saying that what Betty is saying is not valid. If you're looking for someone to do your audit, you could point to that July resolution and say, hey, we have an auditor for the coming year, and in that year, the audit that they would do naturally would be the 17-18 audit. That's the next one that's due. But I wouldn't say that that precludes us from doing an RFP, and that the auditor would say, wait a minute, you said I was your firm.
Right.
You know, hence the RFP process carries its own weight.
So do we currently have a contract with Polly Rogers to do an audit this year?
We have not signed the engagement agreement. They have held off and not done their interim field work because they knew this process was in place.
And one more question, if I can. So I was looking through the materials that Dr. Reynolds provided, and there is conversation about a 5-year, and we asked for 3. Could you provide some insight onto that?
It's hard to speculate inflation and pricing for the latter years. If I recall, I think that the 3 years were set, but there are 2 options to renews up to the 5-year.
Okay, so you were looking for 5 years,
Yeah.
essentially.
Well,
okay.
Either way, 3 years, and we could bail at that point if we or they decided they wanted to, or to fulfill the 5 years, which is fairly common, the option that would be negotiated both to price and to.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the board for staff or for the board members?
Just a point of clarification. So typically the contract is written for 3 years and often extended for a couple more years to equal 5. Although if one wanted to, the contract can be written for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, however many years.
That's true. The RFP was published, as you just stated. The contract is not drawn up yet. So it has that flexibility.
I just would, another wondering, after seeing through that process, I know that if you were to engage a new auditing firm, that initial kind of startup, get to know us, get in, know how to use our records, know how to use our computer system to access records. I am thinking that if you only offered a new firm 1 year, they may not be as inclined to, because that will be for them their most expensive year. So I do think that you would need to contemplate a longer term contract.
And in fact, probably their pricing for the 3-year term takes that into account.
So the proposal is to extend the current engagement through the 2017-18. It's not to offer a new auditor only 1 year.
Are you saying the RFP or a proposal that you've made? What are you saying?
What I'm saying is give a new business manager the opportunity to weigh in on who that business manager is going to be working with for 3 to 5 years. sounds like
Think
fine.
your proposal then is what you're clarifying?
Yeah, I'm
okay.
proposing, that Polly Rogers stay on long enough to,
Just a couple comments about that proposal. I do think that if scarcity of auditors is an issue out there, engaging in this process, having people come and submit their RFP, kind of go through that process to be like, just kidding, we're going to wait another year before we may discourage people from engaging in this process with us a year from now. So that would just be one caution of pursuing that. With regards to the new CFO, I mean, I do believe this is a board decision, and I do feel that by having Teresa, who is current staff, who will be here afterwards, there was somebody from our business department who was involved in this process and who will have to work with our auditor, and the person who makes, the most contact is Teresa. So I feel like this process did include the business partner and its perspective, not just Doug alone, who actually may not be here to work with that individual.
So I think we need to get a motion on the floor, if there's going to be one. Okay.
Okay, I will attempt this.
Okay.
This is a hard choice because we're weighing really important competing interests, but I think I'm coming down on GFOA's recommendation that there is value in changing auditors from time to time, and we have been with Polly Rogers for 15 years at least. So I'll make a motion that we accept the request for proposal from Wilcox moving forward for our auditing service.
I would second.
I was very impressed with Polly Rogers and their rotation of auditors, and that satisfied my concerns. I am also concerned that we received, information from another firm that it's not a good idea to change when Mr. Middlestetter is leaving. I also believe that Wilcox would have been my second choice, but I'm just hesitant for those reasons.
I concur. Like I said, we will be in good hands. That's like the only good thing about however this is decided, and it is a little bit of personal preference, but we'll be in good hands either way. And I think we'll might have to potentially just vote it.
I think I trust the two of you that went through this process, and I'm hearing you say both that Wilcox is a good option, and also I'm hearing that Polly would be fine to carry us over in a transition. And that's what I'm understanding both of you to be saying. Am I reading you correctly, Director Reynolds?
I think so. A limited duration,
Right,
to give
or
the new business manager an opportunity to weigh in.
a year, maybe 2 or something like that, just transition 1 year. Yeah. And, with the information I'm receiving from the research and the policy and statute around rotating auditors, seems like there's good reason for that. And I hear that you rotate them within firm and you achieve the same goal. So, for me, I was impressed with Polly Rogers, and it sounds like Wilcox would do a great job. I think it's important for us to look at our board and what we need in this school district. And I am considering the fact that a CFO is turning over. I do wish in some ways I could hear from all the staff about who do they want to work with, because that makes a big difference. I mean, I don't have to work with these people, so it's really difficult to make a decision. I mean, part of it, I think I heard when we did this with the demographics, was you know, what was it like to be in the room, to be conversing with folks from these businesses, because I think that makes a big difference in your experience of working with them. So that's one thing I don't know, which makes it difficult for me to make a decision. But I think what resonated with me is this idea of 1 year, Polly Rogers, and then and then Wilcox, and then you don't have to repeat. And I don't know if you can do that again. You have to open up the RFP process again. So yeah, I guess I don't have a strong feeling either way, because there's some gaps in the information I would want. So I will defer, I think, to what the two board members who attended the interviews.
Also, just your comments struck something in my mind. It was a conversation with Polly Rogers, and we were just talking about the future of auditing. And as it now works, and in an audit, they can't go over each and every single piece of paper and document and verify it, but they take samples, and the samples are supposed to be representative of the work, and then they take more samples in what are higher risk areas. And anyways, the end of it was that Polly Rogers, is very up on their technology, and they know how to use our system. Wilcox Ardondo also is familiar with our system. There's a new document appendage portion of our system. So in our system, you can pull the invoice, and then behind it is all the supporting documents. And Wilcox Ardondo was just kind of getting on board with knowing how to use that, but I have a feeling they'll be up to date by the time they would engage in our work. But what was interesting is that Polly Rogers was discussing that, now with artificial intelligence, the whole process of auditing is going to change, and they will then, be able, through a computer system very soon, be able to sample each and every single piece of paper in documentation. And it's just kind of interesting to hear how the auditing industry as a whole is changing, as well as, which firms are leading in that work, if and when those times come.
Dylan Hides.
Aye.
Chelsea Martin.
Yes.
Ginger Fitch.
Aye.
Betty Reynolds.
Aye.
Reagan Molitor.
Yes.
Was the resolution language satisfactory for the district?
Can you repeat what the resolution was? Did you get it?
Did you use language?
I knew you were going to ask that. You asking me or the? It was something along the lines of, I move that we accept the request for proposal as offered by Wilcox.
For the 2017-18 school year. Did you include that?
For the 3-year proposal they offered.
Starting the 2017-18 school year, because that was the RFP conditions.
Because I don't recall that you stated in your motion, but I think this would be a nice way to stick with the resolution we passed already, which has Polly Rogers doing the 2017-18 audit, and then adopting the RFP. That's not an option.
What I think if you could restate the resolution, giving the year that you would like Wilcox Ardondo to begin.
What years were included in their RFP?
2017 through
The RFP was to begin 2017-18, which was why this idea of holding and moving to another year would actually require us to do this whole process again, because those same firms may not be interested.
Then I would move that we adopt the RFP as written, which is from the years 2017 through 2020. Is that?
And my intent was just to get clarification that that's indeed what we were voting on, and the resolution met the language that the district needed.
So let's call the vote again with that amended, with that adjusted resolution.
Dylan Hides.
Aye.
Chelsea Martin.
Yes.
Ginger Fitch.
Aye.
Betty Reynolds.
Aye.
Reagan Molitor.
Yes.
Thank you. for the work you did on that, and Dr. Ludwig and the others who spent time with
Thank you. I know that was difficult. I think you gave it plenty of thought and appreciate hearing your input and feedback on that.
Doug, thank you for overseeing the process. And I also just want to publicly acknowledge the excellent work that Polly Rogers has done for us, and it's appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
And Reagan and Betty, thank you for going to all these meetings and the interviews and for bringing a very diverse collection of thoughts to share with us. I really appreciate the different perspectives.
Well, and thank you, and I wanted to acknowledge Ginger as well. She and I kind of pitch hit. She did the first selection of our top 3 candidates, and then I filled in. So Ginger also, thank you.
So we are running past our time, so to the extent that we can move fairly quickly on, we have 2 resolutions, is that correct? 1. Is there anything you want to add to what you've already provided to the board? Okay. So again, are there any objections to proceeding to a vote on resolution number 2017-20?
Let's make a motion, open it for discussion, and then move to a vote. Would that work? I think we could expedite.
Okay.
But there may be something that staff wants to. So I would move that we approve resolution number, sorry, I'm on the 2017-12, the public bid award for renovations at Bolton Primary School.
I second.
Any discussion?
Anything in particular staff would want to add?
Dylan Hides,
Aye.
Chelsea Martin,
Yes.
Ginger Fitch,
Yes.
Betty Reynolds,
Aye.
Regan Molitor.
Yes.
I'm happy for Bolton. This looks like good work that's going to happen. When I read the description of the work, I thought the Bolton community will probably be very pleased with these updates and upgrades.
It can go in our board update.
We're not building a bunny rabbit.
We are adjourned.
That's a record.